disassociate when I'm not in his class anymore and I go to Matt. So the teacher, every student associated with them can see this, can go in, look at the can-dos. They can't change anything. It's a view-only thing because, again, it belongs to the student. This drives a lot of teachers crazy because they say, this kid says he can do this, not to my standards, by golly, all right? So this is, I'll talk a little bit later about how we have to change the mentality there a little bit. Okay, this is what a can-do checklist looks like when it's all opened up. We really have 3 levels of can-dos in here, and this is where that mass customization comes out. Okay, we have a main can-do. This stays stable for every language, every learning context, everything. It doesn't matter. The example here, I can express reactions and emotions. I don't care what language you're speaking. I don't care what culture you are. That's going to happen somehow or another. Okay? We then have sub-can-dos. These were developed by Necessful to be specific instantiations of that general can-do. I believe I heard Miles talking yesterday saying, one of the challenges for teachers is you have to take those broad can-dos and sort of, personalize it for the students, get it into that particular curriculum. These are suggestions on how you might be able to do that. So something I can express happiness, I can express sadness, but the really powerful part here are these custom can-dos. These are open fields. You can put anything in there. Okay? So if you can express frustration, you can put that in there. You can click here and say, I can do that, and you click there and you can attach evidence that that's what I can do. It gets really interesting as you move up a little bit. For example, describing describing procedures. Okay? So depending on what I care about, I'm going to describe different kinds of procedures. Okay? I might be able to describe how do I repair a bicycle. I might describe how do I design clothes. I might say how do I fix a computer. That can be really personal to the student. They may not be able to describe every procedure in the whole world, but where would you start? With something you're passionate about, something you care about. That's where that self-directed learning part really comes out, and where you can also localize it to the particular learning environment that the student is in. Okay, this is the interculturality piece that I did want to show briefly because I think it's a new feature and it's kind of interesting. We basically follow the work of Michael Byram. This is not on some sort of scale where you're on a 0 to 10 scale and 10 is more cultural than 8 or something like that. It really is qualitative recording, self-reflection on the part of the student. It's built around this idea. The overview, I seek experiences with people of other cultures, I understand, I act in an appropriate manner. It sort of follows that very broad framework that Byram has of, what's your emotional reaction, what's your intellectual reaction, and what kind of action then do you take going forward. Vast simplification of his complex theory, but we had to do that to make that work here. Okay, so it's all built around this idea of an encounter. So you can, every time you have an intercultural encounter, it could be person to person, it could be with media, it could be anything that sort of strikes you and perhaps makes you a little bit uncomfortable. So this is a real example, by the way. It's an Iranian-American woman who had traveled to France, speaks a little French, had an interesting experience. Okay, so you add this new encounter. So it starts out, the first prompt is, how did you feel? And specifically, so how did you feel during this encounter is the prompt up there. Whoops, I'm sorry, went ahead. Oops. This particular one, she went out a couple times with this French guy, and they just had some coffee and so forth, and she thought they were just goofing around, and he thought they were dating. All right? So typical thing of, 20-year-old kid abroad, okay, whatever. So she's saying, God, I thought it was, kind of creepy. This guy said that this was a hard thing. So she then talked to her friends, so she gained some more knowledge. And one of her American friends said, oh yeah, this happens sometimes. Now I know that this is not the case in all cultures. I guess in Iranian culture, American culture, you go out, you kind of make it, in her mind anyway, you make it clear. What's the status of the relationship? That didn't happen. So finally, in the act, next time if I travel the country, I'm going to ask, what does it mean that you do this? I think it's always important to ask questions and not make assumptions. Not particularly deep thinking in this example, but I think you can see where this would go, where you have that first, emotional reaction. What a creepy French guy, right? Then you get some more information and say, well, it seems like this is really common, right? And then you say, okay, so how am I going to change my actions? I'm going to reevaluate both my attitude and my actions rather than continue to think that French guys are all creepy. Okay, there's some big issues with this that we've found over the couple years we've been implementing this. Number one is usability. It's huge. There's something like 250 can-dos in there. To hunt and peck through and find them is a big issue. Reliability, this is always an issue with self-assessment. Whoops, excuse me. Old beliefs, new purposes. I'm referring there to teachers. Teachers' old beliefs. I'm the one who decides whether the student is really able to do something or not. And enculturated students, Ray was talking about this, where the students say, is it going to be on the test? Just tell me what I need to spit back. They've gone through, by the time they get to a university, 12, 13, 14 years of that kind of enculturation. Changing it around to saying, no, you're in charge of your learning. No, you reflect on how you learn is not going to happen overnight. So, usability. First thing we're working on, we're tying can-dos to tasks and projects. So in project learning, particularly this natural virtual magnet, it's around math and physics. Actually, it's not even language. They're working with NASA, and the kids do these projects related to this launch of the new space telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope. We're tying can-dos to those so that you don't have to look at all 250 at once. It's like, here's the half dozen can-dos that you'll have to be able to do in order to successfully complete this project. CALM stands for Chinese Advanced Language Learning Modules. These are language learning modules for advanced superior level Chinese students. We're embedding can-dos into the tasks and so forth there. So again, you're only dealing with one or two at a time. You click and you say, yes, I can do it. Here's my evidence. And then it's automatically in your lingofolio. You don't have to go in and hunt around. The other thing is the opposite, tying tasks to can-dos. So in Chinese and Arabic now, if you have a Chinese or Arabic lingofolio, you go in there, there's little tasks associated with can-dos. So if it's something like, I can order in a restaurant, it gives you a little situation, gives you maybe an audio prompt, you say it back, and then your evidence is right there. So you don't, it ties it together that way. Reliability, we're doing some cross-validation studies with our language flagship, which is, again, advanced Chinese students. We have some multiple measures. We're looking at how that relates. Actually, students, on average, are at or a little bit below where they test on standardized tests. And I think that's pretty consistent with most of the literature. A fair amount of variability within that. But Salem Kaiser School District for ESL, we're doing the same thing. We've actually adapted it to the ELL standards that we have in Oregon. So we're going to have that standardized test correlated with students' self-evaluation on lingofolio. The other thing we're trying to do is create some anchor examples. Very often students say, well, I don't know, how good does it have to be? And different teachers will have different interpretations. So we're trying to get some focus groups of knowledgeable practitioners say, okay, yeah, this shows you can do it, this doesn't. So then the kids can go in there and look and say, do I sound like that, or do I sound like that? So they have some concrete frame of reference. The hardest of all is teachers' beliefs. Right? Two responses. The first one I know is not going to work, but I'm putting it up anyway, which is training. We have online tutorials, we have publications, we do workshops. But the literature on professional development is pretty clear that training without follow-up will not change beliefs, and probably won't change behavior either. But when we do this, at least we can say, we told you so. Right? That's it. The real way to change beliefs, though, is through a community of practice. We have two initiatives on that. One, that Glenn is the acronym for Global Language Educators Network. This is for foreign language educators. We have 4 cohorts going on around the country. This is a 2-year process. I won't get into the details, but basically the first year you do an action research project. around some aspect of your practice. Second year, you get leadership training and do a leadership project. They're tied together in an online network. And we think that these ongoing networks where you have a chance to really examine your practice, get some coaching, get some mentoring, be part of an ongoing community is where we can actually get to some of those core beliefs. Ellen is English Language Learners Educators Network. That's the same sort of a thing on the ESL side. That we actually have a grant application in and are waiting to hear. The other tough nut to crack is going to be enculturated students. They figured out, especially if they get to college, they figured out how to game the system. The way to game the system is to give the teacher what the teacher wants. This is a very different way of looking at learning. It's saying you're in charge of your own learning. The first thing is changing from what I call the judge-defendant to the coach-athlete relationship. A coach is there to help the athlete. The coach can't change the standard. You can't lower the high jump bar because you think the kid's nice or because they cleaned up your classroom afterwards, okay? It's there. The competition is out there, whatever it is. The coach is there to support you. Right now, teachers have this sort of, judge, jury, executioner relationship with students as well as that nurturing relationship, and I think we all know how difficult that can be. The other is integration. By that I mean integration across content areas. As I mentioned, we're doing this with this NASA project with math and physics. The really interesting thing, though, I think, is on the ESL side. The ESL standards, thank you. The ESL standards, at least in Oregon, are really good. They're basically Bloom's taxonomy, right? That Ray just showed us, right? I can analyze, I can do all these things. You're doing that in every content area. You're doing that in math, if it's a good math class. You're doing that in social studies. You're doing that in physics. Evidence is being produced there. So if we can tie all these different content areas together, I think we'll be able to get students thinking a little bit differently. Finally, and I love this new word, gamification, okay? Kids are always playing games, right? Human beings relate to games. So things like talent trees, if any of you have ever done World of Warcraft or anything like that, basically it's a list of what you can do in the game. And kids are really competitive about that. I've got 10 of these and you've only got 8 kind of things. The other is having can-dos embedded in quests, challenges, hunts. I think there's some really good work at the University of Arizona and University of Wisconsin now on using gaming for language learning purposes. Okay, I know my time's up here, and we'll have time for questions later. And I would encourage you, if you're interested, please email me. I'd be happy to correspond with you, and that's our website there. Okay. Thank you very much.
I think it disappeared for just a minute, and it's going to come back with a, and no, it didn't. It's supposed to come back with something different here with the laptop. Okay. Okay, and then try it. And there we go. Okay, it worked. Yeah, thank you. I'm Matt Poner, and I'm also, like Carl, I'm connected to a Title VI federally funded resource center in the United States. Mine is the acronym. We all have our little acronyms to help identify ourselves. Mine is CALPER, so that's the Center for Advanced Language Proficiency Education and Research at Penn State. And you have the URL there, so you can, if you're interested in checking out our projects that we've we have underway. And the specific project that I'm going to be talking about today is sort of a satellite grant to the Title VI Center, and this is also through the U.S. Department of Education, and it's to develop a series of comprehension assessments, listening and reading comprehension assessments